This is a figure 4.9 in O'Reilly, and it is one of the most striking of the items that's been recovered from near the vicinity of the tomb of the first emperor, in and around the walls. This is about 20 meters west of the burial mound itself. It is a horse team, 4 horses with a chariot and a driver. It was probably there for review of the troops. In other words, you can imagine that this is a reference to the place where the first emperor, inside the carriage of the chariot, would have been able to review his troops. It is not life size. This one is about half size, half scale, but it is convincing in its robust naturalism. If you look at the horses, while still maintaining a quality of being somewhat generalized. It is ceramic, it is bronze, and it is also gilded. If you take a look at the accoutrements of our horses, you're going to see that they actually have the reins, the harnesses that a real team of horses would have for a chariot. I'd like you to take what you see here and apply it to the horses that come from Pit 1 with the 6,000 infantrymen, and imagine that the soldiers who were carrying weapons were accompanied by horses that also had similarly located, in this case, probably bronze reins that made it very convincing for these animals and men to act on the battlefield. A quick look at what these creatures, these animals look like as they were being excavated. All of this created to serve the emperor in the next life, and that follows the tradition of ancestor worship and preparing tombs to sustain the dead in the next world. In this case, it was incredibly elaborate. We have here the horses that were to accompany the chariot to review troops. We also have the remains of real horses that were buried. So the first emperor, I'm going to suggest, had a lot of backup to serve him eternally in the next world. Han rulers will overthrow the first emperor's dynasty. He's going to be followed by some weak individuals who lack the strength of the first emperor himself. But the Han is going to create a pretty impressive dynasty that's going to be long lived from the 3rd century BCE to the 3rd century CE. They're also going to do a number of things that are pretty impressive. They're going to establish the Silk Route, and that is going to be the way in which Buddhism will enter China. It will be a route going about 5,000 miles, linking a number of peoples together for purposes of trade. It will be a caravan route, essentially using camels. The Han also are going to embrace Confucianism. So they're going to reject the first emperor's approach to legalism, and they're going to bring Confucianism back as a kind of court philosophy religion. And oh, they are so going to love the mandate of heaven. Why? Because the Han can suggest that heaven has indeed determined that the first emperor was not virtuous enough to rule. But of course, the Han would be virtuous enough to rule. We can observe in the period of the Han Dynasty that they maintain all of the past beliefs, certainly Confucianism. We're also going to see that they maintain Taoism, so both of them, plus the initial folk religions, and that would include elaborate tomb burials to sustain the ancestors. What we're looking at right now, in fact, the two bottom slides, this is from the National Museum in Shanghai, and it shows some of the miniature, these are miniature, but standing members of the army that were crafted to assist the Han rulers in the afterlife. So we're continuing some of the practices of the first emperor, but perhaps not on as grand a scale. What I would like us to observe right now is one of the most famous of the Han pieces, and it is the spirit horse, which we're looking at up above. Okay, here is my spirit horse, figure 4.12, located in Mr. O'Reilly's book. And just a reminder, we have everything. We have ancestor worship, we have folk religion, we have shamanism, we have Confucianism, we have Taoism. Did I leave anything out? Hopefully not. It's all here in the period of the Han rule. Horses were incredibly valuable in the world of ancient China. They indicated your status because they're expensive animals, but they also gave you power and they granted you the ability to engage in military activity. So, fine horses were particularly sought after. This is an example that comes from the tomb of a general. During the Han period, folks traveled to Western Asia to buy very special horses. They were referred to as blood sweating horses, kind of barrel chested horses known for their great speed, their power, and their willingness to keep running. In fact, the speed of this horse is suggested by this, which is a stylized swallow. Swallow as in the birdie. That suggests the speed at which this animal can run. It's in a pose galloping, supported, and this is bronze, so we can do this, supported only by one foot. In life, a horse would have been valuable for display of your power, your authority, your wealth. In the military, also for hunting. But in death, horses were also believed to transport the soul to the heaven. And remember, we still have two souls essentially in the deceased, and one of those is the heavenly soul or the Hun. This, I'm going to call him a spirit horse, will be used to transport that soul, the aspect of our being, to the heavenly realm. There's a power and a gracefulness in this piece all at once. The animal has exaggerated eyes and flared nostrils as if he is engaged in total exertion as he gallops forward, carrying, in this case, we believe, the soul of the deceased. There is a sense of energy and movement, not just in the posture with the legs, the three legs of our horse extended into space, but there's also a curving line coming down the tail, following the back lines as well as the mane and the head of our horsey, all making him suggest as if he is actually in motion. You have the opportunity to see one of these in the Philadelphia Museum of Art. Again, in mid gallop, he also seems to be fully exerting himself with his mouth fully open as he moves forward in that curving line moving across his back. A little angular, I'm going to recommend don't look at him from full frontal position because he doesn't work that well. But his side profile is fairly, I'm going to say, comparable to the piece that is in O'Reilly for the power and the elegance and the sense of movement. For the Han, so far we've been able to show that they've continued the traditional belief in ancestor worship and in the use of elaborate burials. We can also show that they believe in the idea of the two souls and in the spirit being carried to the heavens. We also know that they supported Confucianism, which became official at court. In addition to that, I can now show you evidence that they also embraced Taoism. And they did so in particular by using what we can refer to as burial suits made out of jade. This would only have been for the elite. These would have been very, very expensive. The very tiny pieces of jade would have been sewn together with gold thread or silver thread, depending on your rank and status. Folks, what we're looking at here is jade jammies. Coming out of Taoism, it was believed that jade could prevent the corruption of the body. In other words, your body would live forever, would last forever within the tomb, and that would help to ensure your continuation in the afterlife. In China, as in the New World, particularly Mesoamerica, jade was considered to be more valued, highly valued than gold and silver. It was believed to have divine qualities, and it was associated with purity. Often you could find a piece of jade put in the mouth of a dead person to ensure their continuation. In a more practical manner, though, Confucius had a few things to say about jade, the merits of jade. And I'm going to give it to you because it's total Confucianism. He talks about the luminousness of jade as a reference to knowledge. He talks about the unyielding nature of jade as a reference to righteousness that humans can have. The shining surface of jade is benevolence. But more than anything else, the thing that Confucius appreciated about jade was that it was a symbol of truthfulness because it doesn't hide its own flaws. It reflects then good moral leadership, or start to think virtuous ruler or virtuous person, since it is revealing everything truthfully about itself. Jade, then, very special in China as in elsewhere in the world. It was during the Han Dynasty that Buddhism will enter China. It will come very peacefully along the Silk Route or the caravan routes. It will be brought by missionaries. And once it gets to China, it will be influenced by Chinese thinking and philosophies. Particularly Taoism will blend a bit with the Indian original of Buddhism. What we're looking at here, well, of course, on our right is our Han incense burner. On the left, however, is a ceramic vessel that comes from a Han burial tomb. So, continuing the tradition of ancestor worship and rather elaborate burials so that grave goods could go to the next world, what is extraordinary in the Han period about this ceramic object is that it includes at the base a row of Buddhas. So, on a burial item intended for the deceased in a Han tomb, we now add in Buddhism, which suggests this incredible mixing and blending that's going to occur as this new religion appears. Here are a couple of photographs that might give you a sense of what the caravans were actually like as they carried both goods and people with ideas to exchange. This is referred to, Buddhism in China is often referred to as the third faith. It will come along after Confucianism and Taoism, and the sect, essentially the form of Buddhism that arrives in China is the Mahayana or the Greater Vehicle. Within that, there are particular sects that are going to be important for us. One is the Pure Land sect, and the other is the Chan sect or the meditation school. And that is going to end up being important. Both are important because they are also going to spread to Korea and ultimately to Japan. Let's take a look in one of our Smart History discussions at some of the creations depicting the Buddha along the Silk Route.